So, we consider crime generally. What we need is a system that keeps what we define as crime, criminals, people that will commit crime, out of society's way. Not particularly to punish them. We've used punishment in the past as a disincentive, but it seems a very hard, unloving approach. If we're wealthy enough, perhaps we can just afford to keep them out the way. And that's increasingly what the prison system in Western world has developed into. It's not particularly purposed to be a punishment. It's purposed just to keep them off the streets, out of society's way. Whatever the criminal classification is. So, I can remember it was considered terrible to make life pleasant for prisoners. Well, I think that was rather similar thing to something my dad suffered from, which was he was appalled that the poor had garages in their council houses because they shouldn't have that sort of level of income and be given a council house. Yeah. Not terribly sympathetic to the poor, my dad. Interesting bloke though, because he lived at in some ways a very modest standard of living, given his wealth. The wealth always stayed intact. In other words, wealth for the 19th century, and I mean 19th, I think, individual was not something you consumed particularly, but kept for productive purposes. So, of course, then wealth makes wealth and you become incredibly rich, but not necessarily incredibly high consumption level. And after all, there are rather limits to how much you can consume, isn't there? And the rich actually consume a very small fraction of their income. Their income goes to amassing more wealth. Unless, of course, they're on the dis-saving approach whereby, in the end, their family becomes nothing like as rich. So it's not that we aim to get rid of prisons because we don't want to punish the poor. We simply don't punish the poor that are criminal. All we're concerned about is keeping them out of the way of society. So we put them in, quotes, prisons that ideally are rather more humane. Now, I don't mean our prisons are humane, but, well, they're not as bad as we understand the dungeons of old used to be, and chaining the prisoner up against the wall. And yeah, okay. Our prisons are quite nice by comparison. The main problem of prison seems to be other prisoners. And of course, that's an interesting problem if you think about it. I mean, not just a problem, but a fascination, because the people are there in some measure precisely because they are a problem to people in civilization in the world. So they are detained from the world in what we call a prison. And, well, the world's not too keen on spending too much money on them, so they end up sharing a cell, for instance. That very often is a nightmare for at least one of the two persons concerned. So I think we can see this as an evil, can't we? Yes, we need prisons, apparently, but we don't need them to be this bad, do we? Can we afford, quite simply, better prisons in the humane sense? And society finds a level at which it feels it's willing to do that. But increasingly the drift across history looks as though our prisons improve, and presumably the death rate in prisons has declined too. The violence in prisons may have gone up, or at least violence prisoner to prisoner may have gone up. I mean, you can't be violent to the person in the next cell if you can't get to them. But the jailer, as he used to be called, could be pretty violent, of course, and that was not something we would really want in our better moments. So I see the future as prisons getting better as societies get more affluent. There might be a complaint that the prison life is getting better than being poor in civilization. And that starts to cause repercussions. You might not be able to foot the bill of the prisons without taxing the rich rather more. That might be resisted, of course. When all's said and done, it's a question of the bedrock measure of where you are on the continuum between extreme selfishness and an equality benevolence type dimension. And perhaps none of us really know where we are in that regard. But perhaps God's working on it.